Okay, so this video is about how to keep moving with the matrix. And hopefully you have been using it or have tried it out on somebody. You may be using it in your classroom. You may just be thinking about using it in your classroom. But this is additional video training for you so that you can take the matrix and make it as useful as you possibly can in your classroom. So we're going to call this one Continuing the Matrix Journey. So far on your journey, before we look at this particular slide, you will have already set up the matrix, obviously. You'll have invited your student to experience the psychological flexibility point of view by asking them the 4 questions. And we have already done that for you here. I have put up a sample where you've asked about who and what's important and how it feels. And you have asked them what shows up inside of them that gets in the way, perhaps using fear as an example of stuff that shows up inside of us, the yucky stuff. Up here, we've asked them about the things that they do to move away from the uncomfortable stuff that shows up inside of them. These would be behaviors or actions we'd see them do. And finally, we've asked about the things that we want to, our learner or student would like to do to be able to keep moving toward who and what's important to them down here. So having invited them into this experience, I'm going to ask for permission again. And this time I'm going to say, so since I've just shown you my point of view, is it okay if we work with you using this diagram? And just about everyone I've ever worked with has answered yes. So I will continue. And they are now ready to experience what I would call the struggle. And we can even just put that up here. So first thing we're going to be looking at here is this thing called the struggle. Okay, so I return my focus now to the left side of the board over here, and I orient the learner to the behaviors that they do to move away from what they don't want down here in the mind. And I'm going to say something like this, and you can do this. Does doing these things up here work to make this stuff down here, the stuff you don't want, go away? Now, when you do this, you're inviting your student to notice if their behaviors work to reduce or eliminate their unwanted mental experiencing or the stuff showing up in the mind. So, for example, I would continue. If you're in class and this boredom shows up inside of you, then you would go up here and do something like put your head down. So now I'm going to draw that line all the way up. And then, does the boredom go away? And the learner is going to maybe look puzzled at first, your student. But in most cases, they're going to say, no, it doesn't. Or they might say it goes away for a little bit. And again, my response is going to be yes. And how does putting your head down work to make boredom go away and stay away? Does it end up showing back up at some point? And almost everyone will say that it doesn't, or that whatever it is they don't want returns. So now I'm going to draw this arrow down here and say, okay, so you've done that and now you're still feeling that boredom stuff showing up inside of you, right? And then I'm going to continue with the rest of the unwanted list. And the way it's going to work is, so let's say maybe this anger shows up inside of you and you might do this thing that you said. You might come up here and you might yell to get away from your anger. So how well does yelling work to make your anger go away and stay away? Or does the anger show back up? Well, now they're going to probably say, well, it shows back up again. Yep, anger will show back up. Okay, great. I'm going to say, and now we're going to move on to frustration. So frustration might show up inside of you, and you might go up here and you might do this text thing to move away from your frustration. And then when you text, does frustration go away forever, or might it show back up? Oh, no, it's going to show back up, they're going to say. So what we're doing here is we're beginning to draw these loops, and they're getting tighter and tighter until we then draw a circle all the way down to here. And then I might say, and if you keep on doing this stuff, you might feel stuck. Have you ever felt stuck in your life? And they're going to say, oh yeah. And I'm going to say, me too. Doesn't feel very good, does it? So the formula really is to ask some variation of, does doing stuff up here work to make this stuff down here go away? Does anxiety or frustration, etc., go away when we sit and stare or yell or leave, or does it keep showing back up? And, again, the idea here is it's going to go away temporarily, but that it is going to, in the long run, show up. And then what's happening is we're spending a lot of time over here struggling. And I might even say, how much energy are you putting into making this stuff go away? And then they're going to say, oh, a lot, because now they're looking at the board. And then I might say, and how much energy is left to come over here and do the stuff that you want to be able to do? Well, not much. So that's a little bit about the struggle. And the struggle really is a good way to help them tap into this noticing thing a little bit more and helping them to choose things they can do to move either toward or away. They could be doing a toward move to move away, and some of these away moves could work. All of these things we could do at some point. They're all workable for life. The problem is when we end up doing too much of this stuff, then we get stuck over here on this side. And that's what we're trying to illustrate. These are just things people do, just like these are just things people do. And what we're really wanting them to do and help them to do is to notice what works best in the moment that they're in. And again, it could be that in some situations, putting your head down might be just the thing to do if you're tired and need to take a break. And in the classroom setting, when you're trying to move toward these things down here, maybe not so much. So we're having them do that kind of analysis right there in the moment. So that's a little bit about the struggle. It's actually kind of a fun thing to do, and it helps to bring home the point of noticing what works and that psychological flexibility which we're trying to set up. So I'm going to just briefly touch upon the homework. I think we've already talked about this, but then we're kind of setting them up for the homework in the sense of now I'm going to ask for permission to try something out, and I call this homework. And this is where you're going to get some rolled eyeballs and groans. And as soon as they say that, you're going to let them groan for a second or two, and you say, yeah, I know, I'm not a big fan of homework either, but this is the best homework deal you're ever going to get. There's nothing to write down or hand in, and you can either do it or not do it, so it's going to work either way. So would you be willing to give it a try? And, you might get some lingering reluctance, but pretty much everybody's going to let you continue. And the idea then is you're going to say to them, when you leave here, I want you to notice what you do, just the same way we've been doing here today. And whether it feels like what you're doing is a toward move, it's going to move you toward who or what's important to you, or you're doing things to move away from stuff inside of you that you don't want, like that anger or that frustration. And you don't have to do anything else except just notice. And when we get together again, I'm just going to ask you what you noticed about the homework. So then the next time you get a chance to catch up with them, if it's me, I'm going to have this matrix back up here on the board behind me. Again, the matrix needs to be up behind you. And you're going to say, what did you notice about the homework? And most of the time, they're going to say, oh, I didn't do it. And now you're going to say, cool, you just noticed that you didn't do it. What did you do instead? And they're going to look at you kind of funny because they're not used to having somebody say cool in response to I didn't do the homework. But that's going to help them to notice too. And then we're going to sort whatever they say they did onto the board. So, if they went to the movies or they went out with a friend, we're going to ask them, okay, so where would that go? Where would you put that up here on the board? Was it on the toward or was it on the away? So with this homework thing in the ACT Matrix world is we're doing it so that individuals and groups can take what they've learned when we're doing this in front of them initially and take it out there into the world, and that's going to lead to more workable behaviors and satisfaction for them in the long run too. That's exactly what we want them to be doing. We want to give them the best chance to come up with what I would call workable behaviors and be flexible enough to notice the consequences of their actions, or what I would call where their behaviors are taking them. And in this particular model, consequences are really just simply whatever happens after we do what we do. So that's going to lead me into the next and the final part of this video, which I just call yes, and where does it go? So now we have another slide up here. I've got who's important to you, which is the basic matrix question. But running the matrix with students is really a lot like an improvisation routine. You're going to take their words that they're sending your way, and you are going to say yes to them. And that's really the skill here. It's the skill of saying yes to whatever it is they're saying to you in the moment, ... And then you're going to be coming up with the next part of this, some variation of yes, and where does it go? And by where does it go, you're asking them where does it go up here on the board. So the response is going to be yes, and then asking them, where would you put what you just said up here on the matrix? And when you can practice this a bit, you might want to practice it on your own a little bit or with a friend, and respond to your students. It's going to help you to respond to your students when they are throwing more difficult or challenging words or behaviors at you. And you're going to have that urge to want to correct them and control them, and that might be just a thing to do. But what we're going to do in the matrix world, we're going to do something a little bit different, which is we want to promote this noticing thing. So we were going to say yes to whatever it is we might be seeing or hearing, and either where does it go, or we could be saying yes, and where is that taking you right now? So you're helping yourself when you do this remain flexible, and you are then less likely to get stuck yourself. At the same time, this is going to encourage your student to sort his or her experience, and then they become less stuck and more psychologically flexible. And that's exactly what we want them to be doing. So this whole business of sorting, we are sorting for psychological flexibility, because every time we sort, we are encouraging them to take a perspective on whatever it is that they're doing. Okay, so we're really trying to get at this thing called perspective taking, which is the ability to stand outside of yourself for just a second and take a look at the big picture. And the matrix is really showing them what the big picture is. It's showing them about their toward moves, and it's showing them about their away moves. So that's where we want everybody to be, kind of noticing and having workable options and choices to try out. So here would be an example of like a brief exchange. So you're there, and they're going to say to you, so I went to the movies this weekend. So I'm going to say, so great. So you went to the movies. Where would you put that up on the board? And they might say, well, that will go on the toward side since I went with my friends. So then I'm going to say, oh, cool, very nice. So going to the movies, I'm going to write that up here, going to movies. And again, just keep it short. You don't have to write the whole thing out. Going to movies with your friends is important to you, right? So I'm going to put this friends down here because now they're also identifying that their friends are important to them. So they did a toward move to move toward their friends. And so then I'm going to continue that conversation. And they might even say, yeah, well, we had a good time. Okay, good time was had by all. I'm going to write that down here. But now they might add something. They might say, except, we had some trouble deciding what to see. And that led to an argument. And I was getting kind of frustrated. So now you might say, great. So you noticed frustration showing up inside of you. Again, we're using that matrix language of noticing whatever it is that shows up inside of you. It could be toward stuff, it could be away stuff. So now I'm going to write, okay, so that frustration showed up inside of you, right? And then you kind of went up here and you had an argument. All right, great. So you're noticing that happened. And I've asked them where they would put frustration on the board. Kind of jumped ahead here, but the first thing you might say is, where would you put frustration up there on the board? They're going to say, oh, well, I didn't want it, so I'd probably put that on the away side. So now that's when you then would write that frustration and then write that argument up there because they were arguing to move away from their frustration. So the conversation will just continue with students sharing their experiences, and then you're going to be sorting it into the diagram. And as the student sorts it, they come into contact with their toward and away actions and where they have been taking them. And this also is going to allow them to experience more choices and more options and have them working more with you as opposed to working against you. So sorting is really the engine of the matrix. And remember when you were a kid and someone, probably a teacher, had you sort cards, or objects into piles, like put all the animals with 4 legs in this pile, or put all the things that begin with the letter S here and the letter D there. You can just sort about anything, and humans love to sort. We all love to sort stuff. You can't lay off of it. It's a natural thing to do. And so whenever we sort something, we're going to experience it, right? And we're going to experience it sometimes through our 5 senses. And we can also be sorting these experiences into experiences that we want and also experiences that we don't want. So, for example, let's take reading. When students are engaged in reading, they are using a behavior up here to observe words on a page, which would be out here in the world. And as they do that, experiences show up down here in their mind. And then they can all get hooked up or related to other experiences, like I like this book could show up on this side, or this book is boring could show up over here on the away side. Or a question like, oh, what is this author talking about, right? And this whole business of sorting helps them to make comparisons between experiences and figure things out. And when we use the matrix, we are inviting our learners into perspective taking, like I said, by asking them, where would you put that thought or feeling or urge or memory on the matrix? And then they are mentally looking back on themselves. So when it comes right down to it, you can sort anything anyone does into the matrix diagram. And what the matrix is really great for is sorting the stories that we tell ourselves and others. And we all carry stories around with us. And there's the big story of me and what I'm all about, what I'm trying to go toward in my life. But typically stories are going to fall into 2 categories. And the first category is the one I call the flexible stories. And they're the ones where we, feel like we've moved toward some sense of satisfaction over here. Right? We've told a story about how we did something or overcame something or accomplished something pretty cool. And those stories are a lot of fun to tell. We may have learned a new skill. Other stories, though, are less flexible. And they're the stories that we tell because we're trying to seek some kind of relief from uncomfortable stuff that might be showing up inside of us. And what the problem with those stories is that they're the sticky stories where they're stuck on words and they're stuck on phrases. And the big ones are I can't, might be the story of I can't, or it could be the story of I don't want to. It's that kind of story, and you can feel that. And you can also feel that those stories are a lot less flexible, and they tend to have people going up here and doing more and more of this stuck stuff. So I would call them more stuck stories. So when we invite students to sort their experiences and their stories into the matrix, even if we're just doing it for a little while, we're helping them to come up with more flexible stories. And when we can do that, it's going to help them to add to that story, and then they can go on and have more workable experiences. Of course, they are free to keep going back over that stuck story, but we all know where that's going to take them. So there's a little bit about the sorting and the homework and the struggle. And I hope that you find this useful, and I will be in touch with you with some other videos as I get them up and rolling along. Take care.